Welcome to Nice and Blunt. This is take two. I think now we're rolling. Now we have audio. Here we are, second ever live mock draft here on YouTube. So still kind of getting the hang of it a little bit, but I feel better. The audio should be better this time. Let me know in the comment section if it's not, and hopefully we can fix it if that's not the case. But before we get going, just a heads up. If you use my code Nice and Blunt on Underdog, you will get $100 matched on your first deposit when you enter code Nice and Blunt. So hit that up in the comment section to find the link. And now that that's out of the way, we can get this draft going. So we're going to enter the puppy, and this is a big prize tournament here, and it's important to know the context. So if you do want to enter it, understand the rules. There's one quarterback, two running backs. Let me move myself. There we go. One quarterback, two running backs, three wide receivers, one tight end, one flex, and then 10 bench spots. So wide receiver is a position you do need to pay attention to, and it does kind of devalue running back a little bit, given it's less important for your roster. But with that in mind, let's get it going. It's half PPR, and let's join this draft. If you want to join me, you can hit up the link, and it looks like there's one person left. No, so very unlikely we have anyone joining us for this, but that's not a problem. Let's see. We have number 7. The 7 spot is decent, especially the fact that you don't have to wait between the picks. That is nice, but maybe we're going to go running back. Maybe we're going to go Travis Kelce. I have not done many teams with Kelce, and that's an interesting approach to the draft, knowing that you don't have to take tight end for essentially the entire rest of it, and you have the best player at that position by far. It's definitely an advantage. So that's nice. That might be our strategy here. We will see. But yeah, excited about this. We're still waiting. At 4:20, I am gonna spark up and take a bong rip. So if you want to join me for that, heads up, and that'll be fun. But I definitely think Kelce is probably Jennifer. I agree. Kelce does not disappoint. It's a bit bust proof. That's kind of the name of the game. One of the strategies that's nice to employ. Good to see you here in the live chat, Jennifer. Thanks for joining us. But let's just take a look at the board this time. Try and focus a little bit more on that. And here under, yeah, there's gonna be more wide receivers that go on early, and that's kind of the case. But if you have any questions, Jennifer, let us know if you're in the chat. But no pressure, obviously. Just cheers. Thanks for being here. Damn it, we cannot take Kelce. He goes off at 3. I don't like Kelce at 3. I know, just mentioned him as bust proof, but when you have that elite tier talent at the top, I think it's a bit of a reach, and you just have to wait so long to get your next pick. I don't like it. The fact that you are in the middle and can get Kelce, don't have to wait super long. You can still get maybe the Mahomes stack. Like the Mahomes stack is completely out of the question when you take Kelce at number 3, and then the wide receiver potential there. Like maybe you'll get Higgins, but as your one, I don't know. I just don't love it at 3. I'm willing to consider it at number 7. This is a best ball draft, so very little commitment. I was hoping to get Tyreek Hill, but we do not. I really don't do this that often, and I don't think I'm going to do it. I'm not going to go running back. I'm going to go with Stefon Diggs, my next highest rated receiver, in my opinion. I have him at 5, and I do have him in that same tier. There is that elite upside, but with Dalton Kincaid coming in to Buffalo and Khalil Shakir stepping up, there's a chance that Diggs moves back a little bit, but they just pay him so much, it's really also a bust-proof pick, and given how many wide receivers we need, 3 in the starting roster, can't go wrong with that. So Bijan was also in consideration, but Diggs is pretty solid. We can probably get Josh Allen at number 18. That's a good stack to have. It's just so obvious, though, and we are in a tournament where having an individual roster is important. So while we do want to maximize that upside, unless we go like super heavy on Buffalo, it's it's kind of an obvious stack. So we'll see if it's even available. But Saquon's interesting. I do think he's worth a second round pick. So to get him kind of falling a little bit in the middle of the round, that's decent value. But if not, I'll probably just go with Josh Allen. If not, Waddle's in that top 10, top 12 at wide receiver. That's very difficult to find a similar player. We cannot go with Josh Allen. We get sniped. So even though Barkley is falling to us, I don't want to focus on running back in this draft. I think getting an advantage at wide receiver is probably the way to go. And I think this team, yeah, they sniped us on Tyreek Hill. I'm not going to let them get the double stack. That would help them maybe win in this situation. So having Diggs and Waddle is very also an advantage in itself in this format with all the receivers you have to start. But Garrett Wilson late for me over Diggs, but I'm a Jets fan that never learns. Yeah, as much as I like Garrett Wilson, I really think he's more of a second round pick. There's definitely some upside with him that could lead to him being a top 5 player, but there's just so many wide receivers that they're adding in the Jets offense, and it is a new system after all. I do kind of like worry, will he be as dominant of a target share type of option as he was last year? Like he had 145 targets last season. Maybe it repeats, but I don't know if all the touchdowns are going to be all of his. Like there's just some factors in New York that are kind of up in the air. That's the reason why I'm unwilling to go Garrett Wilson in the first round. I still trust Diggs. He's one of the highest paid receivers, and following the money definitely helps. There's a lot of talent with Wilson. I like him a lot in round 2. I do have him as a top 10 wide receiver, but I do have Diggs in a different tier. Waddle, though, I see in the similar vein as Garrett Wilson. Waddle is a little bit... His production's kind of tied to Tua, and Tua obviously has that injury risk, so it can become a little bit tricky with Waddle. However, when he's on the field, sometimes he's really the main go-to touchdown option for Tua. Definitely a big target in that regard. And Tyreek Hill just gets so much attention that Waddle has a lot of targets down the field in single coverage, and he's just so fast, he can take it to the house in any game. So even though he doesn't have as much of a target share, I still see him in that first tier where you can be comfortable with them as your number 1 in this format and still feel like you can compete at a high level. Jalen Waddle does have that elite ceiling, and I do think he kind of represents a tier break at the position. But afterwards, we see Saquon, Nick Chubb, Mahomes, Tony Pollard, Chris Olave, Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, Devontae Smith, T. Higgins, DK Metcalf. A little too high on DK Metcalf personally. Running back is kind of devalued in this draft. That's kind of one of the reasons why I'd rather pass on Bijan. It's not that he can't finish as number 2, but I think you can get somewhat comparable value. Like Derrick Henry here, as long as he's healthy, you're banking in 20 points per game. That's just what he provides. And it's not like the gap between the two when available is that massive. He also fell 4 spots, so that's good value at pick 31. I'm pretty comfortable with this startup. Derrick Henry as our 1, Stephon Diggs, and Jalen Waddle. Derrick Henry also kind of represents a tier break. While I do see Stevenson, Etienne, Najee as comfortable, solid top 15 running backs, Henry, it's just a matter of does he get hurt or not. If some team actually trades for him, then his workload isn't going to go down. Like they know what they're trading for, and they're going to maximize possibly the last year of his contract. I know he's about to turn 30 in January. So Henry is approaching that cliff. We knew it was risky last year, and if it wasn't for a few games he sat out, especially in December, he was still a top 5 running back at worst, in all formats, and he still has that elite ceiling, putting up 20 points per game when healthy. So that's what we're banking on. The drafting of Tyjae Spears in round 3, a little concerning, but that's more of a next year approach. With Will Levis in the mix, I don't know if they're going to be able to pivot to the young options this year. And Jennifer, I agree with you. Calvin Ridley in the end of the 3rd round, I think is also way too high. I think you're not getting good value. Maybe in the 4th, I'd consider it, but you're really banking on Trevor Lawrence sending him the majority of targets. the 10 targets per game that we saw him get in Atlanta, because touchdowns are not exactly his game. There's a lot of other options there, and I don't think Christian Kirk is really dropping off massively. So, yeah, I agree with you. Calvin Ridley is very highly ranked. There's no room for error with that late third round Calvin Ridley draft pick. Personally, not a fan. Maybe if you have the Trevor Lawrence stack, it's like worth it, but I'd much rather go with running back or a quarterback like Justin Fields in that area. I'd much rather go Najee Harris than Calvin Ridley. But here in round 4, again, the value isn't elite. I'm interested in TJ Hawkinson, but we have pick 42, and Burrow has fallen a little bit. Burrow's not a bad quarterback to have. He's definitely one of the better ones. I'm very tempted to go Mike Williams, but with drafting Quentin Johnston, I'd rather pass. I'm just a little bit worried about how many mouths there are to feed in the Chargers offense now. It's just a little bit tricky. In a new system, it's kind of hard to perfectly evaluate who's going to be there. But if you are going to draft one Chargers receiver first, I do prefer Mike Williams. Whenever you hear the coaching staff talk about that receiver room, Mike Williams is always mentioned first. And Keenan Allen, at the end of the day, is past 30. He missed half the season last year. And Mike Williams is a perfect best ball type of pick. Yes, he does give you those like 2-point games sometimes, but he still gets you those 20-plus pointers. And in this format, that is what you want. There's some truly elite upside with Mike Williams, and I do think he's still the number one option on that team. So we see him go at number 46, and that's where I'm comfortable. Late round 4 is, I think, really good value. And ideally, you can get the stack with Herbert falling to you in the 5th round, but I do think Herbert is going to be one of those potential league winners that could finish as a top 3 quarterback this year. Kellen Moore in that offense really blows the roof off of the potential there. And especially with another first-round receiving option, another TCU receiver even later, I think Justin Herbert could really bounce back, because he was top 4 the previous season, and then he really fell off. There's a lot of interceptions last year, but his offensive line got depleted. Keenan Allen got hurt in game 1. Mike Williams got hurt by the time Keenan Allen got back, so it was never a full roster. And then he also had those rib injuries that obviously he was playing through pain, especially in the second half of the season. Those interceptions and a lack of touchdown production, I think, all led to the collection of injuries on that roster. So if they can stay healthy, I really need to knock on wood. The Chargers always have problems, but if they can realize that potential, Herbert could be a home run hit in the same vein as Joe Burrow in round 4. I think he's definitely worth it and provides that good value. Like, he's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 QB7 off the board, and he could definitely finish in the top 2. It's hard to imagine a quarterback going later than this with that type of upside. It's like even Trevor Lawrence. It's hard to see. Herbert, though, does have he's been elite in the past, so definitely interesting. But I mentioned Christian Kirk. We talked about Calvin Ridley, and the disparity in value I don't think is like worth it for Calvin Ridley when you can get Christian Kirk here in round 5 for such strong value. I'm tempted to go running back, but you're not going to get a receiver like Kirk going much later. And last year he had 133 targets, 8 touchdowns, 1,100 yards, 199.9 fantasy points, and I don't see that falling off a cliff. So Christian Kirk as our wide receiver 3, falling a few spots here, is definitely going to contribute a lot on our roster. I feel comfortable with him. But let's check the chat. DJ Chark is wide receiver 1 in Carolina now. Honestly, that's kind of hard to say. I saw that he was going through some surgery lately, so that might delay his reps with Bryce Young a little bit. They pay Adam Thielen quite a bit, and then they drafted Jonathan Mingo. Their depth chart is low. I see a lot of transition in that wide receiver depth chart over the course of the season. I think in the beginning of the year, it's going to be Thielen. Mid-season, Chark is going to have some pop weeks, but by the time we hit like Thanksgiving, December, I think Mingo could be the guy that gets you the championship, is really valuable in the fantasy playoffs, because Thielen is probably going to get hurt at some point. And Mingo, arguably should have been drafted in round 1. There weren't that many players with his size and skill set left in the draft going after him. So Carolina needs a receiver, and because of that situation, I don't want to say DJ Chark is the guy there. I think it's really just a compilation of people. I think Thielen is probably the most valuable, then Mingo, then Chark. But I could be wrong. They're going way, way later. There's some good value in Carolina. But call me old-fashioned, but I'll wait on quarterback and roll with a Goff or even Carr or rookie like Young Stroud. In redraft, I agree with you, Jennifer. That's typically the good strategy in terms of value. But in this tournament, like there aren't that many teams here that pay out any money. And I did put in somebody to get it. Wait, let me just take my pick. Aaron Jones is falling, and Aaron Jones has still elite 20-point upside. He's a really good option for best ball, and to get him 12 picks later, that's really good value. I'm very satisfied with him. I kind of considered him with my previous pick, honestly. So to get him here falling to us is very, very solid. I don't know if I'm going to go with the A.J. Dillon combo, though. In this tournament setting, as I was mentioning, like you're really trying to make a Hail Mary type of roster in this format. Like you need upside and you need that potential to be the possible like number 1 or at least elite tier option. And while it is kind of a high investment round 4, like quarterbacks started going off the board in round 2, and it's kind of just playing to your format. While I definitely would wait later for a quarterback, in this best fall, I'm skewed to go with a talent like Joe Burrow and just lock up that ceiling. But definitely a better strategy in most of the situations you find yourself in. But now we see the running backs go off, so that was a wise investment. This 6-7 round turn, I think, is where most of the value at running back position, especially for your RB2. I think if you can wait until round 3, like if you get Breece Hall, Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, it's not crazy different value to maybe Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson, maybe Saquon, who's probably going to be a holdout candidate, Nick Chubb with Deshaun Watson. It's still a bit of a variable there. And then Pollard's coming off of injury, so there's also a lot of question marks in that situation. Round 3, I think, is the sweet spot where you still get that top 10 option, and then waiting until round 6 for this run is also another really valuable spot to hit it. And that's what allows you to get that value at receiver. I mean, Diggs is going to be in our roster like 12 out of 17 games, Waddle at least 10, if not more, and then Kirk also contributing at a very high rate at that wide receiver 3 position. So the depth we're going to hammer isn't that big of a deal. But my alarm goes off, and it is 4:20. So I'm going to take a hit. If you smoke them if you got them. If you want to join me, that's dope. But I'm out of my lighter messed up, so I'm going with matches right now. But whatever works, right? Whatever gets that spark going. We need the flame however we can get it. There is a possibility that JT bounces back, but with a rookie quarterback, a new coach, and a lot to be concerned about last year, in round 1, I'm just a little hesitant. In round 2, I'm all about it, but in round 1, I don't fully trust it. Our QB is Joe Burrow, so the stack is kind of hard to find, but you know who I think is actually a really valuable running back? He's more of a floor play, though. It's Rachaad White. However, I don't know if I really want to invest in that offense. It's a little bit tricky, and really the most elite best ball pick there is Gabe Davis. Like, if anyone's catching a 90-plus yard touchdown this season and putting up 20 points on like 3 catches, it's Gabe Davis. There's going to be those elite weeks, and I am shooting for the ceiling. So we have Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis. It would be awesome if we had Josh Allen, but it's not the end of the world. We do have the elite ceiling with Gabe Davis. There's going to be like some 30-point games. There's going to be some duds with Gabe Davis, but this is the format you want him in. I think he is a solid pick because it's really just like elite production when those touchdowns hit. When they don't, it's brutal, and that's why he's so risky in redraft. But in best ball, Gabe Davis is definitely worth it. Even if you have Diggs, I'm not worried about it in the slightest. But Rachaad White goes after us, and I think that's really good value on Rachaad White. Unlike James Conner, he's probably going to stay healthy the whole season. Like Conner's going to miss at least 4 games. That's just always what happens with him. And their offenses suck. Like their teams are definitely going to be in position for Caleb Williams, Drake May next year. And that's the risk you take. But it also leads to a ton of garbage time and a lot of checkdowns in those offenses. So there isn't any competition. I can't really imagine any veteran free agent signing there. Like Zeke's not going to Tampa. Why the fuck would he do that? Leonard Fournette's not going to Arizona if he doesn't want to play in Tampa either. So there's not a ton of risk in terms of touches going away from them, and that's why their floor is really, really valuable. But it's more of a redraft pick. Like in this setting, in the tournament especially, I want the ceiling. And it's not that they don't have the ceiling, but they're not going to offer that elite production as much as I would want. Whereas David Montgomery, I think will. I was kind of thinking about David Montgomery with our previous pick, but was hoping maybe he could fall. And especially if Jahmyr Gibbs doesn't work out or he gets injured like DeAndre Swift was last year. Jamal Williams put up 17 touchdowns last season. Detroit is a team that is going to score a ton of touchdowns, and Jared Goff isn't probably going to score the majority of them. I know Jahmyr Gibbs was drafted in the first round, and there is competition there, but this is the plan for best ball. Like, you need to find a scenario where it does work out, and even though you're kind of getting a backup later on, I listened to an interview on the Rich Eisen show. I'll probably link that in maybe a community post after this video, but it was an interview with Dan Campbell, the Detroit Lions coach, and they paid Dave Montgomery $8 million per season on his second contract. Not many teams are willing to do that. And when Rich Eisen asked Dan Campbell what the logic was there, Dan Campbell was basically, I'm tired of watching this guy tear our team to shreds. He's seen what Montgomery can do at an elite level, and I agree with you, Jennifer. That O-line is elite. Penei Sewell is going to come into his own even more in year 3, and if they can stay healthy, there is a very, very solid role for Montgomery. Jahmyr Gibbs is not a 3-down back. He was in a heavy timeshare in Alabama last year, and in his rookie season, while he was a first-round pick, I just don't see him commanding the entire workload. It's going to be a two-headed monster, and especially on the goal line, they're going to let the bruiser be David Montgomery. That's who he profiles as, and I don't think he needs a ton of receptions in order to pay off. I'm looking at touchdown production, and last year, Detroit, even with DeAndre Swift, like Swift put up almost 10 touchdowns last year despite missing like 6 or 7 games. David Montgomery could easily become this year's Jamal Williams, where you're getting just massive double-digit touchdown production. And in best ball, that is money in the bank. So even if Jahmyr Gibbs doesn't get hurt, then Dave Montgomery, I think, is valuable where he's going here in round 8. But in the event where Jahmyr Gibbs does get injured, then we know we are investing in an elite offense. A really high-scoring team that doesn't have a good defense is going to be in garbage time and is going to need to score. So I like Detroit. I think you can hit it from all angles. The only player I really don't want on Detroit is Jameson Williams. But I think even Sam Laporta, the rookie tight end that they drafted, has good value in the ADP. And Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jared Goff as well, I think are really, really good picks that will, at the very least, provide proper value for their ADP. I think they're all pretty much going to outperform it, honestly. Maybe not Amon-Ra St. Brown because he's going so high, but for the most part, I think any Detroit Lion that you're drafting is being drafted at their floor, with the exception of Jameson Williams. I do not want Jameson Williams on my roster. He's still going a little bit too high for me. Like here at pick 92, definitely prefer Dave Montgomery by a landslide. But we're about to be on the clock. Our QB1 is Joe Burrow, but we don't have a tight end yet, and that's going to become a position of need. Did we time out? Yeah, I think we're back though. No, we're next. Pat Freiermuth, is someone I'm considering. But there is a massive tier break at running back that's about to occur as well. So that's something worth paying attention to. Wide receiver, I'm not going to reach there. Tight end's tempting. Damn, we have 7 seconds. I'm going to go Alexander Mattison because in the same idea of Dave Montgomery having elite upside, if Jahmyr Gibbs gets injured, Alexander Mattison could also be a top 5 running back if Dave Montgomery gets injured. He wasn't Dalvin Cook, excuse me, if Dalvin Cook gets injured. And because he is in a tough situation to fully bank on, unless we see Dalvin Cook traded, I don't see him going up. But if Dalvin Cook doesn't get traded, I don't see Mattison going down either. Like, this is typically where he kind of goes, and he's the type of option in this setting that does offer that league-winning potential. So I wouldn't recommend this in a typical redraft format, but in best ball here, where we kind of devalued RB2 a little bit, and I am kind of a little worried about the injury concerns of Aaron Jones, it's nice to have another home run hit possibly. And A.J. Dillon would be someone I'd consider in this vein, but we have Aaron Jones. We don't want to bank on him getting hurt and then that working out. So pivot to another situation where if the starter goes down, you are going to be possibly owning a top 5 running back, if not top 10 at the worst. Like, that's the potential with Dave Montgomery. There aren't that many players in this realm that can have that upside. Like, Kamara might be one, but he's going to get suspended. They drafted Kendry Miller. Rough situation to bank on. Javonte coming off that injury, he has that upside, but the injury concern is hard to trust. He couldn't score a single touchdown last year, so that probably changes, but like he wasn't available. And I don't see Brian Robinson ever becoming a top 10 running back. Charbonnet needs Kenneth Walker to go down, and Walker's pretty young. So in terms of like what you're betting on, Madison vaulting into the top 10 is actually a realistic bet. I don't hate his value in round 10, but quarterback is it hits a cliff in my view in round 10. So that's something worth considering. Jared Goff would be a solid investment here, but we mentioned Freiermuth as a good option, and he's fallen a few picks here. So because I need Freiermuth, I'm going to go Freiermuth. Although I see you, Angus. Thoughts on Mitchell here. I do see Mitchell in the exact same vein, but because I have banked on 2 players that I'm hoping have a starter get injured above them, as my running back 5, I just don't want to do it in round 10. Like, as much as I love the value on Mitchell this late, is that where he went? Where Sorry, I'm just trying to find Mitchell. He's probably still on the board, yeah. He's definitely in the same vein as Madison, but CMC is also there. Mitchell has a weekly role, but I don't know. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, San Francisco just has such a bad omen in terms of like running back injuries. It's just so hard to predict. Like, it could be anyone, honestly. But yes, Elijah Mitchell's in the same vein as Alexander Mattison, and it looks like he's not off the board, so he'd be going even later. So very, very good value. But yeah, there he is, pick 128. He'd be in consideration for our next pick. Backup quarterback is also a consideration for our next pick. Russell Wilson is also kind of like a floor type of tier break. Hard to find a quarterback with the upside. I know Russell Wilson is not doesn't have high stock right now, but with Sean Payton coming into Denver, there is a potential for him to reinvigorate that upside and be a top 10 quarterback possibly again. I'm not saying it's a guarantee, but you're drafting him like as quarterback 20 at this point. There is that potential as well. We do need a backup quarterback at some point, but what about late round flyer on Zach Kuntz, that freak tight end the Jets drafted in the 7th? I just can't I can't endorse a 7th round Jets tight end. Maybe with your last pick if you really want to do it, but I'd much rather go Tyler Conklin if I'm going with a Jets tight end. Rookie tight ends just don't pop. Like, it's so rare that you find one that has a good rookie season, and I think that's just your fan bias speaking. I can't endorse it. No offense, but I just can't do it. Um, just not my cup of tea. Kincaid is interesting though. I don't love the draft pick, the landing spot in Buffalo though. I kind of feel like Michael Mayer would be the most valuable rookie tight end in Las Vegas because they really don't have any competition for him at that position. Whereas Dawson Knox could really mess up the numbers because, like you mentioned, Dawson Knox is there, but I'm on the clock, so I'm a little bit. Let me just focus real quick, and then I'll get back to your comment, Jennifer, in just a second. We are a bit thin at wide receiver depth. Like we do have really good options at the top, but we need to start 3 every week. And in terms of upside, I don't think Sky Moore can really be replicated in terms of his elite breakout potential later on. So he's probably a high consideration here. We don't have much at tight end on this roster. But because I'm so thin at wide receiver, I feel a little bit more pressed to address that position. And I am a believer in Sky Moore. As much as I kind of want to take a rookie wide receiver, I think it's a little bit safer to go with a sophomore wide receiver. And in year 2, with no Juju Smith-Schuster there, with no Mecole Hardman there, I think Sky Moore could really pop. Yes, I know they drafted Marvin Mims, but he's a second-round pick as well. And in year 2, we saw Sky Moore score a touchdown in the Super Bowl. There's a solid role for him and definitely a role that can be expanded. I love the tape coming out of college. I was very high on him as a prospect, and I was pretty pissed to see him fall to the Chiefs as a Chargers fan. So I am going to bet on what I'm hoping doesn't happen as a Chargers fan and go with Sky Moore. There's elite upside. Like you could see some 20-point games for Sky Moore if he starts seeing like 8+ targets a game. That Juju wide receiver 1 role is definitely up for grabs. And as much as Kadarius Toney probably the favorite for that, I really think Sky Moore has just as much viability to claim it. So I think it's worth taking at least one Chief receiver because it's really up for grabs in that offense. But I agree. I do think Marvin Mims is really talented as well. But rookies are ultimately a little bit more difficult to trust than sophomores who've had a full year in that system. But let's shift to the draft board and pay attention to the teams that are on this half of the board. I don't see a ton of receivers with some of these teams, or at least like lately they've been going more running back heavy, quarterback as well. And I might want to consider doing that. But like I mentioned, backup quarterback is kind of interesting. Kyler Murray is going to have some value, but I don't like taking the bet on him. Like there's going to be so many games that he misses. Like really, do you want to take that shot? Like unless you have like a Josh Allen where you're not betting on too much and you just want someone for maybe the fantasy playoffs, in kind of like a late season scenario where your starter goes down, then I could see talking yourself into Murray, but I don't see Burrow missing any time, and there's just too many weeks where he's going to put up zeros where I think you need to pass on Kyler Murray. I don't like the value on him, but there is some logic behind it in this tournament setting. I understand the consideration there, but I'd much rather go Bryce Young and take the upside. He's really talented. I think he's going to be a really good quarterback, and I have some high hopes on Bryce Young. So I'd rather go with him. We are at the long term. We might want to consider it. There's a lot of teams here with just one quarterback. Yeah, I'm probably going to go Bryce Young. I'm not afraid to reach on him. I'm not too worried about that. Otherwise, there's not many like home run hits here where you like know you're getting elite talent. Yeah, I'm just going to go with Bryce Young. Almost missed the timer, but I need a backup quarterback. It's pretty important here. I did reach 12 picks, but I feel like this draft kind of has a premium on quarterback. And some of these teams waited a little bit long to take him. Like these next two teams that have two picks before my next don't have more than one quarterback. They got Mahomes and Herbert. And if they recognize the tier break like I do, then I think they're probably going to take one in round 13 if they don't take one here. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I really reached too high. But I just don't want to be in the scenario where I don't get him. I don't see that many quarterbacks in the same vein as him. I really think he has elite upside. I really do. I know he doesn't have like a ton of options. Yes, I do agree Richardson is definitely more valuable with that rushing ability. But in terms of like backups that are going to play a full season, I don't want to draft more than two in this setting. And I kind of just want to take a bit of a lottery ticket approach. So why not go with a rookie whose talent I believe in? I do believe in Bryce Young as like maybe the next Tua, where as long as he can stay healthy, like there is top 5 upside. He's really that good. I am a believer in Bryce Young's talent, but won't hammer that point home too much. Probably beat that drum too much already, but it looks like running back might be a priority. Like, okay, so after us, four running backs, three, and we have 4. So that's probably something. A couple teams have more wide receivers than us, and then one team has 0 tight ends, though. So that might be worth focusing on. So let's just see who's available at tight end, who we might consider with our next pick. To be honest with you, I kind of feel like Dawson Knox has fallen too much. Like, yes, Kincaid is there, and they did take him in the first round. I know he's really good, but like they still pay Dawson Knox over $10 million a season. They give him a big contract the previous year, and he's one of the highest paid tight ends in the league for like the next 4 seasons. And it's not like his connection with Josh Allen is going away. There is that elite touchdown upside in that Buffalo offense. And at this price, round 13, I don't think he's like, I think at this point you can consider him as like a legit option. But we still only have 5 wide receivers. That's worth paying attention to. Wait a minute. Is McKinnon still on the board? He's probably not. Yes, he was drafted already. I'm forgetting about him, but if you're watching, McKinnon has signed in Kansas City. He's officially a Chief again, and they're probably going to move off CEH. Like, McKinnon has that elite upside. I think you need to try to reach on McKinnon if you can, because he's only going to move up the board and mitigate Pacheco's value a ton. I'm worried about that quite a bit for Pacheco, but McKinnon definitely valuable. Maybe I'm wrong with this, but I do think Knox is valuable. We only have Freiermuth, so you know what? I'm gonna go with Juwan Johnson because he fell a little bit, and I'm probably just gonna go Dawson Knox in the next round. I need options at tight end, and maybe it's worth seeing if Knox can fall to us. To be honest with you, I don't really love this team. I feel like there's some picks I'd like to have back. But you know, hindsight is always 20/20. There's only so much you can do in the moment. But let's just remind you of this roster here. So at quarterback, we have Joe Burrow, Bryce Young, Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones, Montgomery, and Madison are our running backs. And then Diggs, Waddle, Kirk, Gabe Davis, and Sky Moore. The receivers, Pat Freiermuth, Juwan Johnson. The receiver advantage is strong here. Having Henry, if he stays completely healthy, is an advantage, but there's definitely a risk there. And then Burrow has some potential as a top 5 quarterback. That's his floor, but we don't have a stack, so that's one reason why I don't like this team. It could be better, but you know, not every team is going to be perfect. Most teams are not gonna be how you want them to be. But it's worth practicing here. It's always fun, and I'm still getting the hang of this live stream situation as well. Thank you for joining me. If you haven't already and you're still watching, hit that like button. Let me know you enjoy this stream. And if you have any questions about players you are interested at this point, you want my opinion on, go ahead and let me know. I see Kenny Pickett and George Pickens this season, stock rising. I agree. Definitely for Kenny Pickett with their additions to the offensive line. I think Najee Harris is also going to have a bounce-back season, but Pickens would definitely be my favorite receiver in Pittsburgh for sure. I do see some good value for him. But we mentioned Knox earlier, and essentially what I'm saying with this pick is we're hoping that Kincaid doesn't work out. Kincaid has just really deflated the value on Knox, and in this lottery pick type of setting, we're trying to maybe take a contrarian play and banking on maybe the idea that Knox does have a really good season. Irv Smith is a player I have believed in the past. Last year I was really high on Irv Smith. I had him as like a top 12 tight end because he, on a per game basis, actually has had a stretch doing that before, back when he was in Minnesota and healthy. But in Cincinnati, there's, I think, more best ball value than like season long redraft value, where I don't think you're going to know when to start him like until he really sets up a lot of targets on a week to week basis and proves trustworthy. I don't think you're going to know with confidence to plug him into your lineup. And that's where I see him as more of like a good waiver wire ad if you want to stream the position, or you need a backup, or like he really establishes himself by like week 3 and you're like, you know what, let me give him a shot, let's go with it, because I see him as having like some boom potential but some very high bust potential, kind of like CJ Uzoma a couple years ago, where there were a few games. If I recall, CJ Uzoma scored 5 touchdowns 2 seasons ago, and in 2 games, he scored 2 touchdowns apiece. So it was really boom bust, and you're really hoping on like yards after the catch with him. I don't see more than like a 35 yards per game average for Irv Smith, and after that, it's just like, does he score a touchdown? Does he not? So there's some elite upside with him, but I can't see more than like 4 touchdowns on the season for Smith. Whereas Knox, I think, could still put up like 6 or 8 touchdowns in that Buffalo offense, and that's why I still value him a little bit more. So I do see Irv Smith as a good option this late, but at this point, like, you're really taking a dart throw, and in most like redraft settings, you wouldn't be drafting this backup tight end. You'd be going for somebody else. Like, you'd want them off the waiver wire throughout the season, and you'd be willing to drop them at a moment's notice. Whereas, in best ball here, like, you need options because you don't have a waiver wire and you can't hit that position later on. So that's where I prefer a guy like Knox. I think there's a little more touchdown upside, and there's also more of a contrarian aspect to it. But Smith is valuable. Irv Smith can't be forgotten completely. That is for sure. But at this late, like, in the same vein of a backup running back that could be elite, be a top 5 option if his starter goes down, I see Tyjae Spears as that type of player. And while it does kind of feel like maybe a wasted pick, like, the only chance this team does have is if Derrick Henry and the Tennessee Titans running back works out. So if he goes down, I need a backup plan. And this is more of a redraft type of strategy, but because he's going so fucking late, I do think this is one of the situations where you can make that handcuff pick. Like, Derrick Henry's pretty old. At the very least, he's probably going to sit out some games for the sake of health and like mitigating him. Like, if it's a Thursday night game, they're probably not going to start him. And Tyjae Spears is going to get that 25 touch workload. So here in best ball, I do think Spears is valuable. And in this Tennessee backfield logic, it's one of the rare instances where I do think you can handcuff the backup in the best ball setting, and it doesn't like completely kneecap you. Like, typically I wouldn't want to do it. Like I mentioned, I wouldn't want to do it with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon because you have to take Dillon so much higher, round 10. But you're going with Tyjae Spears in round 15. It's not a massive investment. So I like Tyjae Spears this late with someone who could really pop with elite upside. He scored, if I'm not wrong, 17 touchdowns at Tulane last year, 4 in the Cotton Bowl against USC in his last game as a college player. And Tyjae Spears going to Tennessee is in a perfect situation. Long-term in Dynasty, I love Tyjae Spears. Really, really think he's a really high upside elite option. But let's check this chat real quick. Did the Giants draft a wide receiver? They did. They went with Jalen Hyatt in round 3, and I think he actually has like some good value here in best ball, but his price is so inflated, it is a bit risky. Like, at the end of the day, he's a 3rd round rookie wide receiver. There is some risk, but Hyatt has that elite down the field speed, and I think he should have been a second round pick, and Brian Dable, I think, agrees with me on that. Supposedly, Brian Dable made the call himself to trade up for Jalin Hyatt. They took him at the early third round, and I think it was kind of a shock that he fell that late. There were some mock drafts I saw him going like round 1 in some instances, but he just had so many home run hits. Like, he was so untouched. If you go back and watch his highlight reel, it's almost like this is never going to happen in the NFL where he's this wide open. But he does have that elite speed. I do think he was worth a second round pick, and he does have some good value if other receivers get hurt in New York. But they got Waller there, Wan'Dale Robinson. He's kind of hard to bet on if you don't have that Daniel Jones stack. Otherwise, I think he's kind of a little bit overpriced. I prefer Wan'Dale Robinson going 3 rounds later, pick 166 in this draft. Jalin Hyatt went at 129. Like, that's what I'm talking about in terms of maximizing value. Hyatt has some upside for sure, but I think Wan'Dale has a little more draft value, in my opinion. But damn, this is a bit tough, honestly. But Khalil Shakir, I think if our Cole Beasley, Stephon Diggs situation ever doesn't work out, Khalil Shakir could pop off 10 touchdowns, honestly. Like, he profiles as a really good touchdown option. I was high on him last season as a rookie, and he flashed in the playoffs a little bit. He was starting to get a role in the Buffalo offense. I think he is worth like that high best ball value here. And even though we don't have Josh Allen, we did go with the Buffalo stack. But going back to the chat, Aaron Jones carried me at the start of the season. Yeah, he still has that potential. If you look at his contract, there's actually like very few players paid more at the running back position than Aaron Jones. He's getting paid like $12.5 million next season. And I still think he's part of that bridge to the A.J. Dillon era. I still don't fully trust A.J. Dillon. And to your point, later on in the year, when Aaron Jones is more banged up, he is going to lose some value, and they are going to shift more to A.J. Dillon, especially on the goal line. Like, in the month of December when it's cold as fuck and you're getting tackled by 4 guys because you got to punch in a 2-yard score, A.J. Dillon is going to get those touches on the goal line in December like he did the last 2 seasons. But in the beginning of the year, Aaron Jones is going to have those elite, like, 30-point games. Probably as competent, then Aaron Jones has that top 10 upside. Definitely worth a really solid pick here in best ball. And as your RB2, I agree, a player that can really carry you. He has good value. He's one of those really solid picks at running back in round 6. Sometimes I've seen him fall to early round 7. It's very rare that happens. I don't want to reach on him in round 5, but I think he is kind of worth a late 5th rounder. So to get him in round 6, I think is the sweet spot. Aaron Jones is your RB2 in that class of like really valuable 20-plus point type of players. Yeah, I like him a lot too. But we're coming up with a pick in 3 spots here. And Sam Laporta's falling like crazy. He is one of those rookie tight ends that I think you could take a chance on. Like I mentioned, I like the Detroit offense a lot. Laporta also went to Iowa, like TJ Hawkinson. I think the Lions know how to incorporate him in their offense, and he actually caught a ton of passes. He has some really good stats, and Iowa's a tight end factory. He played all 4 years. We did not hammer tight end early, so because he fell like 25 spots here, I'm going to go with the value and go with Sam Laporta. Maybe it's a risky pick here, but we really don't have like good value at tight end, and we do need tight end by committee. So we need a unique roster, and having 4 tight ends is definitely one of the ways to do it. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm not like super in love with this team, but if he didn't fall 25 spots, I don't think I would have taken him. So Laporta is also one of those like lower end tight ends that you can kind of consider. I see him in the same vein as Irv Smith, like Angus, like you asked about earlier in the chat. At this point, like anyone can give you a touchdown. Anyone can put up a good game at tight end. So it's just about like, who do you like? What's good value in your opinion? And to get Laporta in round 17 as opposed to Irv Smith in round 14, that's the vein of value that I'm interested in. But maybe I took too many too many tight ends. We need our last pick to be a wide receiver. I think wide receiver will be the way to go. But it's crazy to me that Josh Palmer is going in round 18. Like, I know they drafted Quentin Johnston, but it's not like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are not going to get hurt. Like, there's still going to be a ton of value for Palmer, and he had 107 targets last year. Like, really, you think that's just going to evaporate completely out of thin air? I am worried that Quentin Johnston is actually not going to overtake Palmer as the number 3. And because the offense is going to be better, because they have, Kellen Moore as offensive coordinator, there's going to be some really, really high upside weeks. And Herbert can always throw a bomb for a 50-yard touchdown. Palmer's going to be one of those players down the field that gets forgotten by the secondary. And in round 18, he's the type of home run dart throw that's worth taking a shot on. That is, one of the reasons to pass on Mike Williams and maybe Keenan Allen earlier in rounds like 4 or 5. If you just don't believe in them staying healthy. Like, the insane value on Josh Palmer is just so good. I think Quentin Johnston might be going a little bit too high, whereas Josh Palmer is going way too late, and they're both going to offer comparable value. So I think Palmer is still a player to consider. Maybe it's just my Chargers bias talking. Like, I kind of talked you off the cliff with Zach Kuntz at tight end earlier for the Jets. But Palmer is not in the same situation. Palmer's now in year 3, and he had a breakout season last year with the team. He definitely has a role. Purdy would be a player I'd consider. He could have top 15 value. But I think it's more important that I get wide receiver because I only have 6 on this roster. I kind of ignored that position a little bit, and it's important to have good depth in this setting. So Purdy would be probably maybe a more valuable pick, probably a good strategy as well. But because I need receiver, I'm going to go Josh Palmer. And, this roster, there's a lot of bets being made that the starter goes down above some of these players. Like Alexander Mattison, that's definitely hoping that Dalvin Cook either gets traded or hurt. Tyjae Spears only works out if Henry gets traded, misses time. Yeah, there's a bit of hope with this roster. Same with Dawson Knox as well. So I don't love this team, as I've mentioned, but it's not the end of the world. There are some strengths to it, and there are some scenarios where it works out. And at this point in the year, like, I can't predict anything. I don't know who's going to get hurt. I don't know what's actually going to happen. So we are going with our gut. And yes, I agree, it is a bit homer, definitely a homer pick. But we're banking on the scenario where Keenan or Mike Williams get hurt, or maybe Quentin Johnston is just not ready. To be honest with you, I did not love the pick. I felt like there were some lacking plays in his route tree. It's just kind of a size and speed situation. Long term, as a replacement for Mike Williams, he's not bad. But year 1, I don't see Quentin Johnston being like an elite contributor. I still see Palmer as probably the front runner for that wide receiver 3 spot. But yeah, we need one of those receivers to get hurt in order for this to work out. So that's it for this draft. Our team, let's just run back all of these spots. We got Joe Burrow and Bryce Young. We're just betting on this working out. I don't want to go with a third quarterback in this situation. We went with 4 tight ends. So that may not work out. But if Joe Burrow, scores like 25 a week, then it's not bad. He was injured last year with that appendix surgery to start the season. There are some scenarios where he actually is even better and takes another leap this year. But Bryce Young, we're hoping works out as a rookie. Probably not going to be elite, but as a backup, I don't hate it. Then Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones, David Montgomery, Alexander Mattison, Tyjae Spears at running back. We only need 5 in this setting. Don't want more than that. And then Stephon Diggs, Jalen Waddle, Christian Kirk, Gabe Davis, Sky Moore, Khalil Shakir, Josh Palmer at wide receiver. A lot of things need to go in our favor, but that's what this team is. Like I mentioned, kind of a lottery pick where we are hoping that some players above them get hurt. But then at tight end, it's by committee, and Freiermuth is going to score some touchdowns, but when he doesn't, we got Juwan Johnson, Dawson Knox, and Laporta as backups. I probably shouldn't have taken the fourth tight end. Maybe Juwan Johnson was the reach there. Probably not the best pick. Would have preferred to have maybe a third quarterback or possibly another receiver instead. But not every draft is perfect. Learn from my mistakes, and I will see you in the next one. We'll take a commemorative hit to close this draft, but that's it for me, basically. That's it for this one. I hope the audio was better. It seems like it was, but last time it was shit. I'm also not going to do those the background music. That was a mistake. I don't like that. But we're trying things out, trial by error. But I'll see you next time. My name's Adam Riancho, and thank you for watching Nice and Blunt.